This is the European edition of Breaking Banks, the world's #1 fintech podcast and radio show. We bring you the European unicorns, startups, founders, regulators, and leaders innovating the rapidly evolving fintech scene today. A truly localized podcast with both English and local language content, with some of the world's most well-known hosts and influencers in the fintech sector globally. Join us every week as we explore what makes the European Union a phenomenal proving ground for many of the fastest growing fintech plays in the world today. Okay, let's roll.
Hello guys, welcome to Breaking Banks Europe. My name is Matteo Rizzi. I'm the executive producer of the show. This is show number 73. Where does the money go? Focused on impact investing, Africa, and corporate innovation programs. I'm here with three guests. Actually, there is a little bit of a story behind this show. I was supposed to be one of the guests for several reasons. Why? Because I'm an investor in Africa with Bamboo Capital Partners, as you might have seen in a recent announcement, but also because corporate innovation program is pretty much one of the main focus of FTS. But at the end of the day, I thought that the guests that we have today were actually compelling enough to sort of retrench myself into a moderator role, and I'm happy to engage the conversation with them. We have Dario, Benoit, and Hafou, and I will start with the usual couple of minutes of introduction, starting with Dario. Dario, welcome to Breaking Banks Europe for the very first time.
Hey, Theo, this is great. And, after so many months, been in conversation, we finally have to, put our faces out there. Good to see everyone. Good to see Benoit after such a long time. So myself, I am the founder of Briter Bridges. Briter is a data-driven research company focused on what we call underserved markets, meaning those markets that lack an adequate supply of information that would be able to basically showcase the opportunities that actually lie in this market. Africa being the continent of interest, or a main continent of interest, even though we've been working and we are working on a lot of data on Latin America and South Asia, especially in a comparative fashion, because we want to basically highlight the similarities and the differences that happen across, the ecosystems in these regions.
Thank you, Dario. Benoit, welcome to the show. You as well for the first time.
Thanks.
Actually, not. It might be the second time.
I don't know.
Is it? Sure? No, is it? No, then I'm confusing. You have been in some other comment, because I like you so much that I want to bring you in every debate I do. So, but I think you're a Breaking Banks virgin, to say so. Yeah, so welcome to the show then.
Yeah, thanks so much. Very happy to see you. A few words about me. Yes, I started my career as an entrepreneur. Started in 2020, and I set up two fintech companies. One sold in 2008 to a Belgian company, and the last one in 2013 to a Singaporean company. And after, I moved to the investment sector to back some entrepreneurs in Africa, because different reasons. One part of my family lived in Africa. I have an African uncle, so I spent a lot of time in Africa. And all my cousins asked me a lot of money, to start businesses. And it was considered as lending money. And I decided, to take some stake in their company. And it was completely crazy because it was completely new for them. And it was 2016. And we started Saviu just after to say, no, we don't want to lend money, but we want to take equity in a new entrepreneur, new startup. And we could syndicate some LPs, so I mean some wealthy entrepreneur with us. And now we manage a fund with Arthur Tuet, my co-founder, about 20 million euro. And we are specialized in mobility, in fintech and distribution. and we did some investment in East Africa and also West Africa, and we started from 50K to 1 million, so a big range, and that's all.
Thank you, Benoit. And actually, it's curious because there is also a little story behind the way we met again. Benoit and I were on a sort of a same deal back with my very first fund almost like 8 years ago. And then with Bamboo Capital, we were actually looking at a couple of startups. And my partner in the fund, the name's Saviu Ventures, and I said, okay, well, they seems like to have a good deal. And then I see Benoit. I said, this name sounds so familiar, and it's that familiar that then looking back at my iPhone pictures, I have a picture from the both of us back almost 10 years ago with two giant Viking hats at the party. And then all of a sudden, it enlightened a lot of souvenir, and I'm really happy that we got back into doing some business together, Benoit.
Same for me, and we spent a lot of time in 2012 and 13 to discuss about my last fintech as entrepreneur, and I'm so happy to see you in Africa connecting startup and corporates, because that's you like doing, also investing, but the market is now completely open, and you started the meeting like this with the corporate. They are very hungry. They want to know more about startup, and entrepreneur and VC funds are there, to connect that two pieces of the puzzle and to make deals together.
Absolutely. So let's go on with our third guest, last but not least. Hey, Hafou, welcome. We're happy that you managed to deal with the camera, and we would have loved you to be introduced first. That would be our courtesy, of course, but you needed some setup time. So the story with Hafou is that we were in the same panel, I believe, no longer than a week ago. And I believe that was like an instant, sort of brain-mind connection. And all of a sudden, I invited Hafou to a couple of conversations, and I also wanted her to be in the Breaking Banks, because I thought your experience coming from outside back into Abidjan and helping the local ecosystem to grow, I think is a great story. Hafou, welcome to Breaking Banks Europe.
Super excited to be here. So like you said, my background is in, traditional banking. I was an investment banker, then a financial advisory consultant, working again with financial institution. And then for me, it was important to come back. I'm originally from Ivory Coast, from Abidjan. So I wanted to come back and kind of work within financial services here. My first incline was toward private equity and investing in SMEs. And I realized that there was a huge gap between some of the ticket sizes and really the ability of the readiness of some of the SMEs that were here. So then I started my own kind of advisory firm, financial advisory firm, around supporting SMEs with transaction advisory, investment readiness services, and especially building capacity and TA around management and so on. So we use a lot of, in one of my sector, because I'm also a consultant within the African Development Bank around agribusiness. And it's so funny that maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, we were looking at some vertebrate mapping around ag tech in Africa and seeing all of the players we're looking to support, like Sun Culture, Cold Hubs, Cross Boundary. We're working with all of these guys. And there's so much work to do to really work with the unbanked and some of these sectors that are disfranchised within the continent. So I'm really excited for this conversation. And thank you for my setup time. It's a busy weekend for
Thank you, Hafou. So just to frame the conversation, this is not a traditional impact VC investing in Africa, okay? This is a slightly more focused conversation into the need for innovation for large corporations, and I want to put banks and insurance on it, and how the market is, what we could do better, and what are the levers, that we can move to make it progresses. Before that, I would like to give the floor to Dario, because you are like the watcher of the numbers, and the watcher of the stats. And I think that it's still useful to give us a little bit of a perspective in how is that money flowing into Africa in terms of new money, existing investor, how many startups are in the ecosystem, because at the end of the day, a corporate innovation program involves, on one side, the corporation needs for innovation, but on the other side, we need the startups to matchmake with them. And startups are an integral part of the ecosystem, and understanding how these are funded and how much progress has been done in a continent in the startup investments will help us assessing what is needed for the corporate innovation program. Dario, over to you. And by the way, as of now, imagine we are in a cafe and saying, hey, I wanna intervene. You don't need to. The conversation doesn't need to go through me all the time. Okay, Dario, over to you.
Thanks, Matteo. I think what you just said about the existence of startup and a thriving startup ecosystem as a not just as the supply side, but as the demand side is very important. One of the, I just jump straight in, but one of the trends that I'm the most excited about is the presence of these new successful entrepreneurs, especially in the fintech and the e-commerce space, that are starting because of they've succeeded with their fundraising rounds. They've achieved some sort of like hero stages in their ecosystem. You can Flutterwave, but also the Jumia guys and Lori and Kobo, like growth stage entrepreneurs, are starting to give back into the ecosystem when it comes to mentorship, when it comes to like best practices, when it comes to also becoming clients for earlier stage startups. And so we'll see sort of an organic cycle of mutual help that is happening within the ecosystem, right? And it's very funny because I was actually on the phone with the guys from Saviu a few days ago, talking to Kamtar, talking to Paps, and we're seeing a lot of this mutual help that is happening across startups. A lot of partnerships that are happening with corporates, with investors themselves, with the governments, with banks. And I think this is one of the steps that everyone was really waiting for. I think Benoit used the word, the region is now open for business, right? And what I also see, within the region is really the fact that, over the past few years, the venture capital ecosystem was growing. We've seen some acquisition happening sporadically, but they were happening, some growth stage deal happening. But what we are actually seeing now is an organic growth of the whole tide, right? It's not just sporadic yacht and good boats around. It's just literally what I call like the whole tide, rising. And what I mean by tide is growth in partnerships opportunities, growth in venture capital availabilities, growth into global programs, from Startup Bootcamp to Y Combinator to Rocket Internet, to Chinese and Japanese investors that are starting to look at, at the continent. You mentioned what new capital availability is out there. So Francophone African, we're actually just about to release a report about Francophone African, which is also why I was on the phone with Saviu's portfolio. But we're seeing a huge sort of inflow of capital towards Francophone Africa, which wasn't as present before. We're seeing a massive influx coming from Japan and China. And it's very interesting because this money is actually not coming from governments, but it's coming from the private sector. So new ventures, new private pools, and new corporates that are setting up funds. In Francophone Africa, obviously, there's a CFO with their Mobility 54 Toyota Corporation Fund. They just made a few investments. And I find this to be a very interesting trend, because once you actually look at the demographic of capital coming from the UK or the US or Europe, a lot of the money, also you're part of Bamboo, right? So you know that a lot of the money is actually institutional money. And I think this is a crucial distinction that needs to be made, because when there's a need for both private and public capital pools to go out there. I know, for instance, Saviu. It sounds like I'm praising Saviu, but like I know for sure Saviu's LPs are mainly, or if not all of them, are coming from the private sector. So years and decades of industry knowledge, and we're seeing a lot of this. The CFO Mobility 54 is one of them, but a lot of new funds that have been set up. If you ask me about a breakdown very quickly about who is getting money and where, at Briter we've codified this into some sort of the innovation diamond, looking at Nigeria, South Africa, Egypt, and Kenya as the four major recipients for capital. And way down the ladder we can see a second tier that is steadily growing, but is still attracting far less capital, which are Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, Uganda, Tunisia, Morocco. I think about North Africa, and then I close and I get back to you guys. I think another trend that is very interesting is the fact that a lot of Middle Eastern funds from the Gulf are finally, eyeing Africa, usually through Egypt and through Morocco. So they're starting to put money into Egyptian startups, and then Egyptian startups are starting to broaden and expanding towards sub-Saharan Africa. We've seen Swivel, who not only expanded to Africa, but also to Pakistan. We've seen Visita, right? And we've seen quite a number of, I don't even know if it's actually spelled Visita, but anyway, the medical tech company that's expanding towards sub-Saharan Africa. So I guess that's what I mean by the tidal wave rising, because everyone, Francophone Africa, Middle Eastern funds, Asian funds, institutional money, more private capital is actually being made available for the ecosystem. And obviously, I guess we'll reap the fruits of this over the next few years. Maybe now is a bit too early to draw conclusions, but at least we're seeing this movement that before wasn't there.
Thank you, Dario. Hafou, I saw you nodding several times when Dario was talking. So please go ahead.
I pretty much agreed with a lot of what he was saying, especially when he was mentioning that now there's more capital coming towards Francophone Africa. But even when we're saying this, I want us to be cautious, because it's more in terms of it's only a fraction of what is going to some of these other countries. But I think even the general interest is important. And the part that we need to jump over is beyond the interest. We need to make sure that these transactions are happening and that we do have a similar success stories so that we can continue, build a chain. And I think there's a couple of factors with Francophone Africa. So I'm just going to focus there, since I think the others just get enough attention. It's one that we have, smaller countries. And then you also have, so economies of scale is the big thing. And then being able to also develop the ecosystem is part of it. So you might have some really good startup and so on, but they might not even have been in contact with investor before. So they don't necessarily know the process. They don't even know how taking participation or equity works, or, how angel investors work. So that preparation in terms of deal readiness and making them ripe for investors and for it to actually happen is really the step that we need to jump over. And that kind of leads to one thing that you and I discussed, how I was, I have tons of friends in Nigeria that are like working with CRE Ventures. And, one of the founders of Flutter Waves that I know well was mentioning that they want to come and, invest in Cote d'Ivoire or in some other Francophone countries, but they just don't know where to start, who to contact, how would it happen. So just creating and putting together this event that I'm working on, really bringing some of these startups together, putting them on a platform, like standardizing the documentation, kind of doing a first round of filtering so that we can provide them with kind of a portfolio of, selection of companies that could be investable. It's already some work that we have to do. So to be able to attract some of these other investors that are now looking to venture outside of the respective countries. Yeah.
It's actually interesting that without even like predicting but we are focusing our experience and interest into Francophone Africa for this specific debate into like a corporate innovation program. Why? Because the opportunity of having 200 million people, and then Benoit, I'll give you the floor to develop that. The opportunity to have over 200 million people with the same currency in the same region, which hasn't reached its full potential. I mean, that if I had to pick one place where to start, I would probably pick Francophone Africa to start launching a series of corporate innovation program. Benoit.
I totally agree with you, but I want to start and to say that Nigeria ecosystem today is an example for Francophone country. We have a fintech space with two major examples, Paystack and Flutterwave. Yes, and it gives stars in any eyes of any entrepreneur in Francophone country. We can do it. And it was mentioned just before. You know, the shareholders, the entrepreneurs of Flutterwave and Paystack, they will invest their own money in new entrepreneurs in their country. And that's we need now in Francophone country. We need to have more money from local entrepreneur investing in local company. Today, all the business angel, wealthy entrepreneur, Lebanese people in Francophone country, they invest in Europe. And each time we discuss with them, we don't have good deals in our country. That's not true. We have some very good deals, but they prefer investing in Europe because it's safe. And we created Saviu, and we are talking to many investors and corporates, you know, to value and to make bridges and to make a clear ecosystem, because we have entrepreneurs, we have money, we have a middle class, we have corporate, and the space of West Africa and Francophone country is huge, and it's mature. So Nigeria is a good example. Now we need to find the good entrepreneur, the good spaces, and we discussed about mobility space, fintech space. We have the same landscape in Francophone country. But now we need to be proud, and we need to get to take some risk and to invest in that new leader of tomorrow.
So before, I mean, the last quick turnaround I want to do before we get into the break, and we'll have like 5 minutes to do so. So is let's agree on definitions here. So we talked about corporate innovation program. To me, a corporate innovation program is a matchmaking on a given vertical between a traditional or established business and technologies and or startups in a different way. And by different, in a variety of ways. One way could be do venture building together, so find a problem and put a team on top. It could be collaborating with an existing startup, or it could be investing in an existing startup. This is, to me, the native definition of innovation program, of a corporate innovation program. Would you agree with me, Dario? Snappy.
Absolutely, Matteo. I was gonna, you finished my thought in the sense that obviously it's very important to understand what the use cases for a corporate innovation could be, because corporate innovation is very vague and very broad as a term, right? But let's approach the conversation by way of looking at use cases, right? So corporates usually look into startups to learn / acquire their technology component, because maybe they are too costly, too rigid, too bureaucratic, too risk averse to just launch a whole kind of like sandbox or a whole spin-off or lab to launch a new product. So they usually like test the market by way of looking at
stay in the what, don't go into the how, Dario. Stay in the what.
Sure. Second is corporates might be looking at startups to understand their market, and also at whether they can find new avenues to reach their market, so extend their customers, so extend their distribution channels, right? And I've found this to be one of the most interesting part, because there's no acquisition involved, there is no due diligence that is needed, there is very much old-fashioned business contracting that happens, but this can really lead to a lot of to a lot of outcomes. We were just on the phone with Kantar a few days ago talking about how there is a lot of distribution in FMCG companies that from Bolloré to DHL, who are looking at better distribution channels, even Watch, right, who are working with the big companies. And because these local startups have been able to really create, I'm probably getting into the how, but because they've been able to create this local network, they represent a huge opportunity for corporates that maybe are coming from the outside, and just they're in front of one simple problem for them: how to reach customer X, right? Between my product and customer X, there's a fog, right? And how do I get through the fog? And usually the local startup, especially in the distribution area, and the kind of startups that leverage local agents, are the one that have been gaining a lot of traction. So partnership, I would say, for distribution channel, extending distribution channels. And the second is the technological component, right? And then I guess the third one was when companies are getting too big, the big guns probably have an interest in just acquiring the whole company, meaning technology, customer base, management, because it's a cheaper exercise than trying to expand organically, right? I would say these are the three major that come to my mind right now.
Thank you, Dario. And actually, I sort of changed my mind. I think that we will actually take a break here, and then starting our second part with Benoit going to Benoit and Hafou at the same time. What are the sectors that are more likely to attract corporate innovation program? We mentioned agri-tech, for example. That would be an easy example that comes to mind. And second, and maybe this is more on the Hafou experience, because you're involved a lot, with SMEs on the ground. Which are the typical candidates, that we could sell or we could propose, and what are the best way to matchmaking? And getting a little bit more into the how, okay? Is the right approach to do investment? Is more a commercial collaboration? Is to do a fast-fading pilot? All this and more in the second part of Breaking Banks Europe. Stay with us.
At timepledge.org, we are building the largest free coaching and advisory platform for entrepreneurs by providing mentorship opportunities based on pledged time. Our network of seasoned industry experts acting as coaches is working for free, pledging their valued time to the next generation of entrepreneurs who will change everything. Our portfolio of sessions goes over every skill an entrepreneur needs to successfully launch his or her startup, from how to pitch and behave with investors to how to best market your idea online, or even how to best manage your team. We have the perfect sessions with the perfect mentors. Want to learn how to become the best entrepreneur you can be, or mentor the next generation of entrepreneurs in Africa and Asia? Please visit timepledge.org and let's get you started.
Welcome back to Breaking Banks Europe. This is a show about corporate innovation program focused in Africa. We are with Benoit, Dario, and Hafou. There is an incredible, good, and fortunate focus on Francophone Africa. But we are actually talking beyond that, because now we are getting into what are the verticals that you guys see more prominent in advancing a dialogue for corporates to start dealing with startups, and how? Benoit, what's your take?
So, according to us, the mobility space is booming in terms of open innovation. We have companies as Bolloré, CMA. They operate their business in all Africa and especially in West Francophone countries, and they don't have any what I call digital environment. They don't know what is digital today. And we have some small startups, and Dario mentioned Kantar, PAPS, Kobo, and they are doing their revolution on the door-to-door business. And you know that in Africa, the pain point is to deliver something to the village. And Bolloré, they can manage, some box, some containers, but how we can deliver a small box to the village? And for us, only startups could answer to that question. So to answer directly to you, Matteo, mobility space is booming, and we have the main companies who manage the freight forwarding, and they are looking for agile company to deliver goods to the village. So mobility space is definitely, for me, the best ecosystem for corporates and startups. And the second one, it's not the fintech, it's a part of the fintech, that's the insurtech. Insurtech, we have a middle class, and today in Ivory Coast, you need an insurance for your car. You need that insurance, and to subscribe to an insurance in the customer process, you need to go to a local agent, a broker. That's a pain point. So through any digital devices, now you can get your own insurance in few minutes. And for me, that's a huge market. And all the main insurance company as AXA, Allianz, SAM, they are not ready to target the consumer. They are very good in B2B.
I mean, they are ready in Europe, but they are not ready in Africa.
Yeah, of course. I'm talking about Africa. They are ready in Europe. In Europe they did a lot of investments, and now they have a digital everywhere. But in Africa, they don't know what is a consumer. They know what is a business. They know how to insure a company, but to propose a car insurance, they don't know. So they reach a huge market for insurance using digital for the middle class. And they are targeting also some startups to help them to target that new market for them.
Hafou.
I'm going to take a bit of a step back, because I think when I think of corporate innovation, I think of any corporation making an intentional, investment into fostering new ideas, right? And nowadays it is immediately assimilated with tech and, fintech and, insurtech and all of that. But I think a lot of our old industry in Africa, for example, do need some innovation. And that could come in the form of, if like Dario gave some example of how you can do that. And it could be with an incubator within the corporation, working with startup outside, or, like sponsoring other like startup competition ideas like Orange Lab is doing. A lot of these new tech companies and like old ones are doing that. But sectors that definitely need it, we have like large companies, like you said, like Sifka, Bolloré, and all of that are working here and are using like super old systems that aren't as nimble and as like efficient as we would like. We don't transform like the cocoa and the coffee because of like, generational systems that have been built. And those innovation might not even be technological. It could be as simple as like really setting up new manufacturing plants and bringing in the cocoa, like, just figuring out how to make the system more efficient, especially for, the bottom of the pyramid. So I think some of these other, like we need to open up corporate innovation outside of tech companies, outside of companies that already have maybe some tech component, and going all the way back to some industries that are just like working the way they have been working and are now trying to bring in tech into their system. And we're seeing that in the energy sector, with all of the clean energy and solar and wind, there's a lot of like innovation in that space. Obviously some technological. The agricultural sector, is experiencing a lot of, ag tech, and really how do we improve our system? There's lots of talk around the food system for the UN food system approaching in September. So how do we make, how do we have, food insecurity here when there's other region where food goes bad? Like, how do we improve those systems? Education. With the pandemic, we've seen that we were all, we've known for generations and centuries how we just go to the classroom, we sit in front of the teacher, and that's how we've learned for years. Pandemic, we're all learning from our computer, but it doesn't really work for kids. Like, I have a 2-year-old, and, her school was sending me homework, and I was like, what am I supposed to do? Like, I'm not a teacher, like, how do we revolutionize industries that have been, just don't have much innovation embedded in the way they've been built? So I think it's for everyone to just input, but there's different ways to do it. Yeah.
Actually, the while you were talking, and actually after Benoit observation, I was thinking that the first employer of the continent is agriculture, and the second one is mining. Okay, which are two extremely traditional industries for which indeed digital will help, but not only. There are there is a need for an innovation that goes way beyond the data collection and the scoring and the digital processes, and maybe it has to do a lot with it's incremental innovation, but it doesn't come from inside, or is way easier to take it from outside, which makes me ask the next question, that is, what do you think are the main challenges today for large corporations? Because, Benoit, you mentioned, the insurances. To convince an insurance that doesn't have any digital footprint, that making a partnership with a startup that digitizes, car insurances is decently easy. A scale of 1 to 10 is more a 7 or an 8, right? But convincing a huge food or agri-tech business that, by making some technology improvement or by collaborating with a sort of a culture that is completely outside their comfort zone would be beneficial is way more complicated. Who wants to give a stab to that?
If you want, I can give you a return of experience. Our first investment were in the agriculture business, agtech, and today that's not our best investment. We believed that there was a huge market with a lot of customer demand, and we are blocked by several stakeholders. You are talking about the cacao, filière cacao. They don't want to move. They don't want to integrate digital because they have their own rules, they have their policy, and the only people who want to have more, digital process or to use any apps, that's the farmer. But the rest of the stakeholder, they don't want to move. So for me, agtech, that's not a dream. It will come a real business, but we need to convince all the stakeholders, and they are not ready for the moment. Fintech, insurtech, mobility, they are ready because we are from the private sector. The private sector, filière cacao, it's a gray area between state, between private. So that's definitely
so
difficult
mining,
to convince.
For example, that's
mining's the same.
Changing process, innovating in processes that will, improve at least the way some of these things work. But yeah, I agree. Those places are like much harder.
And that's a bit the shame, because the miner or the farmer, they have two phones. They can send their then tomatoes, potatoes, manioc directly from their phone to the next village. So they are aware about what is tech. But when you want to discuss about the president of Filière Cacao, they say, no, we don't want to have any advices. we know what is our business, and we don't want. I don't want to innovate, but they are a bit afraid about the innovation because they cannot manage it.
Dario, this is a moment where I'm going to tell a part of your life story for 30 seconds. And you started your love story with Africa when you went was it in Ghana? You went in Ghana to work for an ONG that didn't exist, but you only discovered it after you landed. And then you said, you know what, I'm here for a month. So you started, knocking at everyone's door and start building data around what you were observing in the ecosystem in what then became Briter Bridges, after that. What do you think? I mean, some of these conversations, must have been with some of these players. Would you agree with what Hafou and Benoit just shared?
Sure. Yeah, I always say that Briter was born by mistake. But I'm actually surprised you remember the story. So I would say there's definitely a problem with the transmission of information out there. So something that I've been very interested in has been the strategy that Bolt and Glovo are adopting. So Glovo and Bolt are raising hundreds of millions, and then they're redirecting some of this money to emerging market expansion. Right now, I don't know if the strategy is that they're putting in place is testing and allocating a specific pool to then generate data about customer behavior, about routes, right, logistic routes, about suppliers, about just like the demand and supply. I don't know whether that's actually the way they're going about it. But what I'm seeing, and I think this can work as an example for other global companies that are processing billions of dollars, is that there's room for experimentation, right? As much as corporate innovation are allocating specific funds or corporate venture arms to either absorbing new startups or partnering with new startups or doing like trade deals that then eventually can turn into longer term partnerships. I think this represents a massive opportunity for major companies that are internationally focused, right? So definitely there's an information problem, right? So there's an access. You don't really know what is happening on the ground, especially when you start looking at peri-urban areas, rural areas. Like once you actually start going out there, you can see that there are very little connection. There's very little formality in the way business is carried out, and it's just the way it is. And so there is a need for bridges to be built with the more formal economy. And I do believe that the business opportunity for this is in the order of trillions. It's not even on the order of like, when you get a pitch deck for what combinator say, oh, my TAM is 100 billion. No, I think the next 50 years we'll see the whole world trying to include this part. And it's not just Africa. It's even it's Asia, it's Latin America, it's the Middle East. It's huge regions that are still doing business in an old-fashioned way, in a way that could be optimized. And in that optimization of the process, I think lies is where the business opportunity is, right? So it's not about like saving the poor or saving the farmers or like doing SDGs. It's very much about like improving processes, and everyone wants to improve processes, from the smallholder farmer to the miner, right? So there's a problem in information. So there's a narrative that needs to be built. Hopefully, Briter is contributing to this, right? But it's also like, I was telling, I was talking to, again, Cantor a few days ago. It was like, but you guys are generating a lot of data, and you can start building infographics with this and putting them out there and see, like, do you know how valuable that content could be for people who are trying to do business in there? And so like a lot of these companies, the payment companies, like the agricultural companies, there's a lot of IoT. Now there's a IoT extravaganza in agriculture. Everyone is building smart farming and precision agriculture, right? So all the data is out there. I know that people are already monetizing it, but there's huge room to build content and build a narrative, because that's what it is. In the next 5 years, if there's enough content and enough data for people to just like be a bit enticed to do business on the ground, then we'll see tangible change. And the second one is, and this is just, again, that's just the way it is. The unit economics are different. The margins that you can build upon are very low. So obviously the risk is very high, and several companies might be, companies usually a bit more risk averse, right? And so what needs to happen is a better conversation between, so like a peer-to-peer type of conversation between the corporates and the startups, where the startups are not going after an acquisition, but they're going after saying, look, I know that I can improve your distribution channels because I know how to monetize this little bit. And if we're able to leverage economies of scale through your partnership, then probably that little margin that I'm making over my little ecosystem can scale a bit more. And ultimately, I also think that there are parts of the business that don't necessarily need to make the return. There are, like, usually a business has a core business, has a satellite part, satellite operation, right? Briter has core businesses and has satellite operation that maybe improve the brand, improve the marketing, improve the reach. This usually might be loss making, or they might have very little margins, right? And so companies could approach the ecosystem, could approach a partnership this way by saying, maybe this won't be my core business in this region, but might be a business that over the next 5 years will generate enough data and insights for me to then expand my business, right? And I think this long-term type of thinking it could be very beneficial, because just a company says, well, I have this pool of money that I can kind of burn, but then I know that, by way of the ecosystem growing, more money being into growing in going into the region, customers probably being empowered and getting a bit more purchasing power, might lead to then an increase in returns for my core business, right? So I think the information and facing and strategizing around the low returns, right? The low margins that there are in many industries right now.
Benoit, where would you start? Would you start with by talking to African-based sort of large corporations, or more into the Toyota or the ABB or a Johnson & Johnson, that they do have operations there? Because in one case, you might have a deeper understanding of the local need for innovation. But on the other case, you might have a more open mind, because maybe this type of programs were successful in other parts of the world, and maybe it won't be a complete sort of bootstrap selling.
So we already started working with Toyota on the mobility space. So Toyota Tsusho, they asked us a kind of understanding on the mobility space, and we are targeting with them some companies as Camtar to know better about what is a driver and what the link between Toyota.
By the way, guys, sorry if I interrupt you, Benoit, but everyone here is mentioning Camtar as if it was Google, and has been at least 2 out of 3. This is the Uber for
sorry about
for
that.
micro
Yes.
for micro truck, for transportation. That's by the way, is full disclosure, is a Saviu, is a super interesting Saviu portfolio company. But so that you auditors have a context. Go ahead, Benoit. Sorry.
No, sorry about that. Yes, but that's the right example, because Toyota today is very interesting in Camtar, because that's a way to target drivers. And drivers, they can deliver goods from the port to the village. So freight forwarder are very interested to get in touch with startups, and automotive business is also very interested because they can sell more. So that's very easy to understand. One, they are looking for agility to deliver, and the other, they want to sell more trucks. And the other component, it's I already told you, it's insurance company. They want to target consumers. So that's quite easy, but they don't have the mobile, they don't have any website, and they have to sell more insurance. So they have no time to develop and to integrate that in their back office system. So they need to partner with companies. They need to partner with startups. And they don't know how to do it. So sometimes they have some initiatives. They can do a kind of incubator, but it doesn't work. That's why they ask to private sector and to specialists to organize this kind of events. But they are completely lost in that ecosystem. And same for freight forwarder. They are asking funds as us to have a view on the deal flow and to see what is booming and what is interesting for their activity. So VC are very important for insurance and all the stakeholders in the mobility space, because they are screening our deal flow just to see, yes, it can match with our activities.
Hafou, don't you think that the fintech in general is also a great angle for this, because it's almost if it gives the opportunity for a three-party agreements, right? So you got the corporations, and then you got the bank as the provider of trust and capital and reach, and then you have the startups to provide the technology. As an example, there are a few grown-ups that are converting themselves in super apps because they believe that they will do much more money in, let's take the mobility example. In the mobility example, a lot of startups are thinking in this space as fintechs completely, because they're saying, we're going to become a leasing company for the vehicles. We are going to digitize the pay slips for the drivers. We are going to do peer-to-peer payments, in between people that are belonging to the app, and so on and so forth. So you have a very like a financial services sort of focused background. Would you agree with me?
I think definitely fintech is definitely a super important space for all of the banking revolution that is needed for Africa. And I think tech companies or at least our mobile operators are the ones who were able to jump on that wave much faster than the banks, right? So we saw with M-Pesa, and now we have Orange Money, MTN Money, Move Money, like all type of, all the mobile operators have some type of mobile money now, right? Because the issue is with the way banks are centralized, there's, we know already the numbers of unbanked, and it has to do with, the central structure and even the requirements and some of the basic needs that bank or requirements from banks people aren't able to provide it. And banks here are actually really, really expensive. When you think of it's more of a fee-based model here, where you're paying almost $20 to $30 a month to have a bank account. So there's a huge gap between, what the banks can do and what the population needs, which is need to be able to transact. So now the tech companies are turning into fintech because they have a portfolio of capital via not only their users, and now they have via Orange Money and all of the transaction. Like I have like $300 to $400 sitting on my Orange Money, right? So what do they do with that capital? And I think the advantage now for banking like institution, and if they could wake up and act a bit faster, would be to jump on that and work with the mobile operator. And I know some banks are doing that, because I know now with Banque Atlantique, you have a way to kind of, transfer money directly through your Orange Money. And then, but the biggest opportunity would be for it to be one seamless platform. How Venmo was able to jump into the US market and make it so easy to like transfer money within friends. People just want to transact. No one really wants to carry cash. No one really wants to be able to have to go somewhere to send money to someone. So transaction is the key. And if we can just jump through those hoops and not have to just necessarily separate, the tech companies from the banking company and make it like a uniform platform, then that would be really advantageous. And for the startup in fintech, there's a lot of interesting one. But I think in terms of volume and like we're saying, economies of scale, there's a lot of tiny small ones. But if you look at the ones that are, large and like having all of the numbers. It's kind of these bigger mobile operator ones that are kind of like dominating the space, at least in terms of value.
Thank you, Hafou. So, guys, our time is up. Thank you so much for this conversation. I think is a good scene setting, and I'm really, even personally, looking forward to for the ones who know me, I'm more on the doing side than on the talking side. So I'm really eager to start making some of these experiments and connecting some of these links. As usual, let's wrap the show up with 30 seconds on where people can find you, your website, a way to reach out to you. Dario, you first.
I guess I'm reachable at briterbridges.com, and our business intelligence platform is called briterintelligence.com, where you can find deals and thousands of companies and investors across emerging markets. And all the social media are linked to that. Thank you, Dario. Benoit?
So on LinkedIn, social media, Benoit Delestre, and of course on saviu.vc, our website.
Thank you, Benoit. Hafou?
On all social media, it will be Hafou Touré-Samb. Sometimes there's a dash, sometimes there's space, but there's not many Hafous anywhere, so it's okay. So if you spell it that way, it's here for you. You should be able to find me. I'm everywhere: LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and then our website is hts-partners.com. And you can contact us there as well for any deals or preparation. Yeah.
Thank you, guys. It was great to have you on the show, all of you for the first time. And I look forward for more conversations on this topic. Thank you so much, and until next time.
Thanks for listening to Breaking Banks Europe, a Provoke Media podcast in cooperation with FinTech Stage. Don't forget to tweet us out, shout out, or post to the team at Breaking Banks EU on Twitter. If there's something or someone you'd like to hear on our cast, let us know. See you next week on Breaking Banks Europe.